Sup dogs, TheOdie here, and you guys want to make a horror chase sequence very similar to TheOdie, where the player runs off and then the chaser will chase you from one map to another map to another map until pretty much all eternity. It was requested several times, so here's how you do it. This video is going to be done a little bit differently because we are going to build this together. So we're going to start with something that we both know and easily understand. We have the killer, and it chases the player based on turning on a switch. And then of course at the very end, we're going to have the killer chase us from one map to another map, and eventually being able to quote unquote trail the player, so that if the player goes up into a room and then come out of that room, then the killer should be able to chase from behind that room, rather than having a starting point for each map. It's a very manual process where you actually have to copy and paste the killer on every single map, but I'll get to that later on. Just know that there is no magical plugin or no magical simple way of doing this. Even if you were on Unity or any other game engine, you will still be testing for each map. One thing I do ask is that you try to be very aware from the starting to the very end, because if you can do that and you can understand how we start from something very basic and get more and more complex, then congratulations, you're on your very first step to creating your own AI. With all that said, let's get started. So on this map, I have my good buddy Stuff, and he's just going to work very straightforward. He has the pathfinding, and when he catches me, he's just going to go, got you. In addition, I created a couple more rooms, such as the upstairs hallway, and I made 3 more rooms: avocado, butter, and chocolate. And as you can tell, they're each independent and unique to their own kind, doing absolutely one thing and one thing only. But hey, the main purpose of today's video is to showcase the use of the killer transferring between map to map. So first of all, we're going to assume that there's a switch that turns on that will trigger our killer to do what they gotta do. And I'll just create a brand new one instead of recycling the old ones that we have made in the past for previous tutorials. And if you guys are interested, the playlist is right there or in the descriptions that you can check out for later. So this will be trigger killer. And I'm just going to have it start immediately when the maps does. Okay, so the idea here is that when the player transfers, we're going to go upstairs, is that the killer will spawn here and do what he needs to do. Well, it's actually very, very manual. So I literally do create a copy of my killer, and I just place them in each and every single one of these rooms. And I could place them right here, but of course, if we were to do that, and the player were to transfer from this map onto this map, then obviously the killer will already be there, and well, we don't want that. We want the player to have a little bit of a head start before the killer starts chasing the player. So what I'm going to do is drag this guy over here in this corner, double click him to open him up. And the other thing to note is that when the player does transfer on this map, because this switch is already on, we're actually going to be able to see this guy visible, and well, that would be awkward. Man, that's awkward. So what I'm going to do is open him up, create a copy, paste it, so that he has all that information in the later page. But in the prior page, we're actually just going to have something that says control cell switch A, and in that new page, we're going to trigger that open, so that's right there. You can actually take this off if you want, it does not matter. But we do want this one to remain as trigger killer. Now I'm going to erase this and switch this instead to auto run. You could also have it as parallel processing. And actually, we're going to do parallel processing because of the fact that we're going to have a small wait timer before he actually appears. So I'm going to change his image to none. This way, when we actually do start in this map, we won't see him at all. And we're also going to change his opacity by doing a set movement route. And the reason we want to do this is so that he's invisible. And the moment he gets spawned, he's going to get spawned in the correct facing direction of wherever the entrance is. So once that happens, we're going to transfer this event on over to where he needs to be. He's going to go in the correct direction, which would be right. And then we're going to wait some time, and then he's going to appear physically by changing the opacity back to 255. And through a test, there he is. And oh my god, he got me. God, oh man, I've been caught. So that was very nice and simple, but I'm going to make a couple of changes that will make our life a little bit easier, just because this guy will be copy and pasted to each and every single one of these rooms. And that's by changing this wait command into a manual timer. You guys guessed it. And manual timers are really, really easy. I've made one in the past that you can see here. And if you guys are very interested in seeing how a manual timer is well utilized, then I do have a video that you can click on right there. So this is all there is that goes into building a custom timer. And I'm going to change this instead to wait per 10 frames. Or actually, let's go to wait per 5 frames, just to make it a little bit more manageable to tweak around with. So a thing to note here is that because we're waiting 5 frames, instead of every +1 equaling 1 second, instead it's +12 to equal 1 second. So every time that this number becomes divisible by 12, it is 1 second. So timer variable equals 12, 24, 36, so on and so forth. And in case you forget, you can always just create a little bit of a note tag, or otherwise known as a comment in my case, and just say that 60 divided by 5 equals 12, so 12 is 1 second. There you go. And we actually don't need this switch here. This was only for the little trick I created for that tutorial. So we'll delete this. Apply, and OK. So now when we go back into here, instead of having this wait 60 frames, we're actually going to delete this and instead turn on a switch called timer. And just to recall, if I go back into my database, it's running on the switch called timer. So going back into my event, I'm going to move this timer up here. And I actually just realized that we're going to have to create another common event called initialize timer that gets called. And the reason why we want to do that is because we're going to have to reset this variable back down to 0. So I'm going to do it here. Timer variable set to 0. And it's also going to start the timer by that switch I mentioned. And that's all it does. So going into here, I'm actually going to delete this and go into common events and initialize timer. And in here, we're going to create a conditional branch on a variable, timer var. And if I have it equal as 12, then that means 1 full second will have occurred in order to do all of this. So the way that this works is that it's going to call a common event called initialize timer. So it sets timer variable down to 0. Timer will turn on. What timer will do, based on a parallel process, regardless of what map I am in, it will continue to play this out. It will wait for 5 frames, and then it will increment timer variable by 1. So in a total of 12 increments, or 60 frames, it will be equal to 1 second. So by looking at the event, it will say that once timer variable equals 12, then all of this stuff will play. But you'll probably have noticed that this common event should not be in the same page as this test. And the reason for that is because when it does not equal timer variable 12, then it's going to go back to the top here and play initialize timer, which would then cause this event to reinitialize it and set the timer variable down to 0. So that means that timer variable will always equal 0 and will never equals 12. So what we'll have to do is actually create a copy of this page, paste it into another one, and instead have this self switch on A and change this self switch to B, so that this one will also be on B. You can also turn this off too if you want. It's not required. And then of course remove this one here. So going back to page 1, we'll actually want to remove this. And then in page 2, it'll have all of that done there. Now, one thing that you guys probably have wondered, to some of you guys who are a little bit more experienced, is what if I just created a loop and then put it in there? Would that have worked? And the answer to that is yes, it could have worked, but whenever you include a loop inside a parallel process, it will cause the engine to lag. And just to prove it, I'll change this to something that's a little bit more noticeable, like randomly picking some random number, totally and completely. And you're going to notice how terrible it's going to get. Do you notice it? There's like a very slight lag. And if I press F2, it'll actually show me my frames per second. And it's shooting down to 30. When it's a native 60. Oh, that's gross. So what you can do if you want to do this method is that you could include a wait method. But trust me, the wait method for a custom timer is not the brightest idea. So we do want to do this trick here when we actually create on another page. Oopsies. I need that there too. And it was 12. And this is all that it will do here. So again, to recap, once we enter this map, this trigger should have already been switched on, and it runs some parallel process. It will initialize the timer, and then on this page it will wait based on our custom timer until it is ready, and then once it is ready, it will spawn our murderer, and then our murderer will go from invisible, moves him to where he needs to be, to visible, and then that's his normal. Once he catches you, you get the game over. I forgot to turn self switch A on here. Alright, now it should be good to go. Ah, he's chasing me. Ah, he's still chasing me. Oh my god, I'm going to butter. And I did not include him here, but if we do, all we gotta do is control copy, go into butter, and toss him here. And the only thing we need to change is his transportation. So come here and face up. So yeah, it's a very, very manual process, and you do have to do this for each individual map that you can potentially have the killer in. And that's also exactly why when you're playing a video game with these sort of transferring, chasing killers, that the developer actually limits the amount of rooms that you can enter through. So you'll notice that once I come back into this room, well, it doesn't work anymore. It's bugged. And here's the reason why. If I look at this, all the self switches have already turned on, and it's locked to here, so he'll just be up in this corner by the time I return back home. Or back to this hallway, rather. So at this point, how can we fix this? Well, that's where we actually get rid of these self switches and change it to a manual switch. And I'll call it trigger killer A and trigger killer B. So then they will work exactly like the self switches. So instead of self switch, it's now trigger killer A. And instead of trigger killer cell switch B, it's now trigger killer B. And then what we do here is create a new event, and we call this trigger killer manager. And this one will run on parallel. Switch is trigger killer, and all it's going to do is turn off A and B. And yes, you will have to copy it on each map that you have it in. A little bit annoying, I know, but that's also what's involved with doing this sort of event. Here he is. Or not. Oh yeah, I forgot. At the very end, make sure that you do an erase event. There it is. So erase event means that we'll erase this particular event after it runs when it needs to run from top to bottom. But when you leave the map and come back into this map, the event will still be there. So it's not a permanent delete of the event. It just deletes it while you're on the map. But once you come back in, it respawns it. So I leave. Oh my god, he's chasing me. And I go up here. And oh my god, he's chasing me. Oh no. Good thing I have that little laundry basket over there to loop-de-loop. And when I come here, you're going to notice that he came from over there. Haha. How many of you guys saw that coming? I saw it coming for the longest time, I promise and swear. And here's the reason. It's because of this one here. So this is where it gets a little bit more manual yet again. So right here, we're going to open this up so that we can do control variables. And if you haven't made a player X and player Y variable, please do so. I will recycle these. And you're going to go to game data, change it, character map X, and then same thing for the Y. So we're getting the X and Y axis of the player. Boop. And then you're going to do a conditional branch, and it's going to check whether or not the player is located right here, which is 4-7. 4, 7. Cut and paste. Yeah, it even says it right there. So that actually works out very well. So we'll want to take these, cut it, and paste it over here. And the reason for that is because if we kept it in page 2, then it won't actually test for these conditions until we pass our timer limit. Oh. Oh, and there you have it. It works out. Okay, so that totally reminded me that I forgot to make sure that these move types were fixed. And only this one is chasing me. There he goes. So then the condition that the player is coming out of this bot, player gets teleported right here, which is 16-4. So we're just going to control this, paste it. If it's 16-4, he will come out of here and face down. So we might as well get these over into butter. Okay, just make sure that it's the same thing. Delete the old one. Grab stuff, shove them right in. And then of course change this up a little bit. The nice thing about this is that it's only one room, so we don't have to test for the parameters. And we could just straight up teleport him where he needs to be. Yeah, stuff. Oh, leave me alone. Stuff. Oh my god. You keep chasing me. But I can juke. Oh, no, I can't. Come on, Stuff. You're making me look bad. Oh, no. Alright, Stuff. I made that little laundry basket there so I could juke you. Come on. Do it right. There he goes. Ta-da! And it all works. It works. It works. It works. It works. Okay, one last and final thing is the reason why I created the custom timer is not so I can manually input the number like this through a scroll, but instead to create a variable that says stuff spawn timer. And I'm going to do the same for the upstairs room. Change that variable there. And then go on over to where I first initialize the event. Oopsies. Where I first initialized the event, which I believe was not in here, but instead in here. And I'm going to create the variable stuff spawn timer and then set the number here. So now if I want to change it and make it consistent between all rooms, all I gotta do is just mess around with my scroll wheel here instead of having to copy and paste the wait command over between all of my maps. And of course that gets very, very painstaking. Not to mention that this is kind of painstaking to copy and paste everything already, but it is how it is sometimes. So starting out, we enter in this room, and this event here is what's going to start it. It's going to create the timer. It's going to trigger the killer. Self switch A. And then once that happens, this event is over. We're going to go to our killer, Mr. Steph. And his only command is, got you. But of course, you will want to change it and just copy and paste this one over here. And I could delete this guy's stuff. And then in start, I'm going to set event location of Mr. Steph and put him where I want him to put him. And inside here, I'm going to change and edit this so that it's as appropriate, which will be, I believe the player will spawn out of here, 1612 down below. So 16, ooh, nice, and 12. Wrong one. Actually, yeah, correct. And he's gonna face left. And everything else is the same. And of course, cannot forget about this one, which will turn off both triggers. And we do want to put it right here. So alternatively, you could also put this in a common event. And call this reset killer spawn. And just call to it. And then it'd be done there. Yeah, stuff. And then master juking of stuff. Ugh! You got me. And before I start up the outro, I'm just going to recap one last time. So right here, this is what starts it all up. This is what's going to control the length of the timer for how long it needs to wait. Just remember that mine, if you're copying me, it's every 12 equals 1 second, or it ticks every 5 frames per sequence. So if you want 20 frames, then 5 times 4 is 20. That's 20 frames. This one is stuff themselves, and the only thing you need to change is the test conditions for where to move this event in according to where the player comes from, so that they'll look like that they're chasing from straight behind. don't forget that you do need to initialize the timer. This page will test for when we hit the timer that we set. It will make the event invisible. Oh, we could actually get rid of these two. We don't need those anymore, because we changed the set event location here, and it corrects the direction facing. Sweet. So yeah, we don't need that mumbo jumbo. Okay, and then in the last page is the event itself, where it actually catches the player. Mine is working off of a pathfinder, so it will never be blocked behind a wall. And then once he gets them, he'll just pervertedly say, got you. And then once you transfer into a different map, that's legit it. You just control and copy these two events. You of course do not copy this one, because this is what starts up the whole entire sequence to begin with. So you just copy and paste these two off in the corner somewhere, and the only thing you're editing is the test condition or the transfer location of the event. So bada bang, bada boom. Easy peasy, lemon squeezies. So there you guys have it. So I've replied to several comments that this could actually be done with a plugin, but truth be told, there's not a single plugin that can do them all. What I was referring to was a plugin very similar to Galv's, and it was called an event spawner, so that you wouldn't have to copy and paste the stuff, my killer, to each and every single of the map, but instead you will have an event that runs the spawning of the killer stuff for each map. And when I thought about it, I was like, it's not exactly all that much more intuitive, or rather, it's not all that much more efficient. So I decided to forgo it altogether. I know it would be really nice to just have one plugin that will tell the event to just transfer and chase the player from one map to another, but in all honesty, it's not that simple. And truth be told, regardless of what engine you use, whether it be RPG Maker or Unity, they're still doing a very similar thing, where they're manually creating the model of the killer, or creating a copy of the model of their killer, and testing conditions of where the player has moved into this map, from which door, from which location, and then spawning that killer in that location. It's really all manual like that, and if you don't believe me, you could give it a shot yourself. It's something that you will need to create a AI or just an engine that will really utilize, figure out where the player is, all through mathematics. But of course, when you're doing that, you're creating a huge system that requires a lot of brain powers to maneuver. So if you're interested, by all means create that, and it's something that may be very interesting to have on the market. You can even use what I taught you today as your initial starting point. Maybe at some point when I get better at JavaScript, I'll make exactly just that, but for now, I'm just doing my thing. Anyway, if you found this video to be very helpful, then please do hit the like button. I appreciate it so very much. Comment down below on your thoughts, or if you have any suggestions or ideas for a tutorial or something that you need help with, then let me know. I'm here for you guys. Last thing to note is that I am creating a game myself. It is called Caster's Trap. It's a puzzle horror game, and you can actually follow the development logs right, oh god, please be right there, or in the descriptions or in the comments, because alternatively it could be right there. It's that little icon thing that will appear if you're on desktop. I think it's also on mobile, but it's definitely not on TV. Which I don't know why you would be watching a tutorial on TV, but hey, work what works for you. I would appreciate it a lot if you checked it out, and there's also an Instagram if you prefer that method instead. Till the next one, you guys. Later.